First Class Counselors, where we give camp counselors insider tips and advice on how to make a camper summer the best it can be.
And whether you are brand new to the camp world or you have a few years of camp under your belt, self improvement and a growth mindset is built into the DNA of every great staff member, or dare we say it, every first class counselor.
So, my name is Oliver Gregan. My pronouns are he, him, and I'm the executive director at Camp Winona YMCA in DeLeon Springs, Florida.
And my name is Matt Wilfred. My pronouns are he, him. I'm the director of overnight programs for Campfire Circle, and we're an organization that brings the camp experience to kids and families affected by pediatric cancer and serious illness.
And we're back after a pretty long hiatus. I mean, summer is over. We got through it together, you up there in Ontario, me down here in Florida, different temperatures I felt like this summer. And that's what we're going to talk about. We're going to review how our summers went, what sticks out to us, what we're working on in the outdoor season to make sure we're ready for next year, what we thought of our campers and counselors and everything from the summer. It's a synopsis. It's quick and dirty. We just want to make sure that you guys know, like, hey, you guys, you're not alone out there. We all went through some summers this year, and we're going to talk a little bit about it. So, Matt, you want to cover some of our kind of topics for today, or what we're going to get started with?
Yeah, so we're gonna cover about three things ish, and as you know, listeners, it will go in whatever direction it decides to go in. But we're gonna say, how was your summer in 3 words? In 3 words, Oliver and I will tell you about our summer. We'll talk about some cool stories, anything that was like really inspiring or amazing, or an example of being a first class counselor. Some of the changes that we've been seeing with campers and staff since the last summer or over the years. And then we are going to give you a sneak peek on some of the things that we are excited to talk about this season of the podcast. Oliver, we've got a whole year ahead of us, but let's just start with, how was your summer? In 3 words, how was your summer?
Okay, so narrowing it down to 3 words, I was thinking about this before the show because we knew we were going to ask it. I really kind of broke it down a little bit. So the first one I said, my summer this year was, believe it or not, calmer, relatively speaking. Summer camp is crazy, it's wild, it's all the things that you imagine to be. But I mean, I had an amazing leadership team this summer. I had an amazing assistant camp director who, it might have been a crazy summer for her. She started in May before summer camp started. So for her, it was probably wild. She would not agree with the calmer. But for somebody who had gone through two wildly more insane summers before this year, having her come and step in and be that kind of other mature figure on camp really helped out. So calmer was my first one. For those of you who are not aware, Florida had its hottest summer on record since we started recording temperatures like back in the 1800s. So we were looking at, for a lot of people, a hot day is when you get into like 100 or the high 90s. We had like weeks straight that were 110, 115
Wow.
this summer. So we had a lot of procedures about how to make sure that we were staying cool. Like we were in the waterfront every morning. We had sprinklers going in the afternoon. We were making sure kids were out of the sun and they were drinking water and all that kind of stuff. But it was just so hot in Florida this summer. So if anybody needs advice on how to get through those hot days, ask a camp director who lives through them every single summer.
Wow.
And my last one is just expensive. Um, Everything's getting so much more expensive in camp. Whether it's, I mean, staffing, which is not one I complain about. I would. My staffing budget's going up because we're either hiring more staff or paying more money to our staff. I'm fine with that. But when you look at that budget line at the end of the day, it's getting higher. Food costs. Oh, food costs are so high in the United States now. They've jumped by like probably 30% again this past year. You can't keep track of it. So food's getting expensive. So I'm starting to become that camp director who's thinking about like waste, and like electricity bills have gone up, all of it. So the world is getting much more expensive, much faster. And if you're sitting in my seat, you're going to start to like really pay attention. Maybe I'm just becoming an old man now and like turn off the lights. But yeah, the world is getting a lot more expensive this year. So it was, that was something I thought about. But every bad thing there kind of came with a good thing, right? Like, if you are spending more money, you get more toys and stuff to play with. It got hot, but we found ways to keep cool and new programming. And calmer came because of a blessing of having another capable staff member here at camp. So all crazy things. It's positive and negative in its own way. But Matt, I obviously took more than 3 words because I described each word. But can you tell me what your 3 words from your past what 3 months, 4 months?
Yeah, yeah. I'll give you all three, and then I'll talk about them in a little bit. I said wild, inspiring, and systems. And I think following you, Oliver, there's ones that speak to the camp directors out there that might be listening, but there's some nuggets here for counselors too. Um, and yeah, I was also laughing at your old manism as a camp director because there was literally a point at this summer where I said to the staff out loud, why are we spending so much money on worms for fishing? People could just dig them up themselves. And I was like, oh my God, I've turned into my father. So if you have a 30-something-year-old camp director out there, then they're going through their midlife crisis to their counselors. So be kind to them. But okay, wild. So for those of you who may be following, I worked at the family camp side of Campfire Circle in 2022, and this year I was at the kids camp side of Campfire Circle. They're two separate sites, two separate programs, but there's a lot of similarities other than the fact that there are more adults on site during family camp. And what I forgot about my years in kids camping was just how truly, and in the best way, I mean this genuinely in the best way possible, how kids let their freak flags fly when their parents are not around. And it is so fun to watch all the little like socialization things that they're doing, all the little like things that mean a lot to them, and what frustrates them and what excites them, and how you can really, you can do this with adults on site, but you can really like world build when you have just kids on site, and when the staff are really bought into like a theme or just a weird gag. Like we had a backwards meal where everyone just so committed to it that we were singing songs in the dining hall backwards, like we were singing Country Roads Take Me Home, but they did every word backwards in the songbook. It was just it's just so fun when those things organically happen. And Kids Camp is such a great place for it. Inspiring. I got to work with a lot of our volunteers. Campfire Circle has a huge tradition of working with volunteers, and these are like anywhere between 19 and I think 75-year-olds that come up and take on the role as a cabin counselor. And it is amazing to watch doctors and lawyers and architects and people in the trades all come just because they want to be here for our campers. And I really got to see that, and see their skills come out in different ways. And to watch somebody who, wears a suit and tie for 5 days of the week normally come with their like sweatpants and like old camp t-shirts and run like junior boys around the site in the middle of a night on like a raid, and the kids, and they're not like they're just running around camp. It's so fun to get to see them do that, and I'm glad it's a place for them to do that as well. And then systems, I just am reminded of, our kids camp program is huge. There's so many things going on, and what keeps it all together are systems of communication, systems of procedure of how to deal with behavior, systems of how to code receipts so that the end of the summer is not a nightmare when you're trying to do your accounting. Like all of the systems are so important, and I think as camp, as I, maybe I'll just speak for myself. I think I undervalued how important it is to train on those systems as much as it is to get people inspired about working at camp. Is that giving people the systems are actually a really comforting thing as well. So that's something I'm thinking a lot about coming out of this summer.
I like it. I know the systems I can agree with so much, especially I think you and I were younger camp directors, right? So like even if there's existing systems that come in, we're still building our new or adapting to new times and stuff. The systems thing, it's tough. It's kind of like being a counselor all over again, where you're like learning like, what's the daily schedule? Only the question for us as directors is how do you change that daily schedule to make it more efficient?
Yeah, yeah.
So yeah, I totally get it. But let's get into some like kind of good memories from this past summer, because that's the one cool thing with summer camp is, we can tell stories about everything that happened all summer. So what's something that stuck to you this summer? Something you're going to kind of hold on as a memory for a while?
Oh. Yeah, I there were a lot of amazing moments, and this one goes back to my just like campers being themselves, and I think the bravery of our campers, especially our population have gone through a serious illness journey, whether that be cancer or another serious illness, and we get these kids who are well enough to come to camp, and so cool seeing them just like fully embrace this experience of community and this place, and one thing that's special about Campfire Circle is this is sounds like a flex because it kind of is. It's pretty cool. Ed Robertson from the band the Bare Naked Ladies. And if you haven't heard of the Bare Naked Ladies, they're a Canadian band. They're awesome. And Ed Robertson wrote a song for us as part of a fundraiser a while ago. And one of my favorite moments of the summer was this young junior boy. He was not older than 8. I think he was one of the youngest campers we had. He went to a ukulele session with one of our staff members, who was the staff member was brand new too, and like really good on him for navigating the new summer camp experience. But he taught in the ukulele lesson, he taught that camper, the group of campers that they were with, how to play that specific song. And I remember walking by and seeing them learning it together, and I was like, wow, that's ambitious. There's a lot of chords in this song, and I was like, okay, let's see how it goes. And I didn't really hear much except I saw that kid walking around with a ukulele, and I looked at the sign out sheet in the music room, and sure enough, every day that kid was signing up the ukulele. And when it came to closing campfire, I saw his name on the sign up sheet, and I didn't really think much of it. Kids sign up for stuff all the time. And this kid who had never played ukulele before, never sang in front of a group of people, got a Muskoka chair, sat it down in front of everyone at the campfire theater, and played our song. He played our camp song. And in his own way, like, and it was good. Like, he did a really great job of it. And what I loved about that, not only like courage and bravery for him to do that, but it was the environment that was around while that was happening. Campfire is always a little chaotic. It's hard to get like every kid to not talk and listen. Um, and kind of respect the performance in that way, but you could have heard a pin drop. It was so quiet, and there was this group like honoring of what this kid was doing up there. And it was truly beautiful. It was one of like the my greatest moments in camping that I'd seen in a while. So um it was a good one. And I think, the first class counselor spin I would put on it is that I know his counselors encouraged him to do that. I think he said, I'm thinking about it, I might want to. And the counselors were like, well, if you really want to, you should. And we'll practice. We'll spend this extra time. We'll make sure you go to the music room. We'll get you that ukulele. Like it took a lot. It took some work on the counselor's part to make that happen too. So good on the counselors, good on our music instructor, but and especially good on that camper.
Yeah, those are honestly, that's the beautiful story that we like why we do camp, right? It
Yeah.
has so many has so many pieces of why we do camp, from what you're just talking about, the role model counselor, the action of practicing, learning that new skill, developing it, training on it, and then having that courage to go up there on that stage and do something that they haven't done before. Like, it's it's why we do camp at the end of the day. And there's
Yeah.
so many different avenues for those things to happen, whether it's through an activity like a sport, or it's music, or it's arts and crafts, whatever it might be. But man, it's the whole picture there, and it happens at camp, right? Like, and it happens in a week or two. So it's why we do it, you guys.
Yeah.
It's why we do it.
Yeah.
Um, I'm gonna tell my story now, which is a little bit more of like a personal story for me, because I got to get involved. Because like I said earlier, calmer summer, I had stepping back, be more of that director kind of a deal. Don't get to like hop in there all the time with kids. But one of our leadership staff got a little sick during the summer. We were playing this evening program of this court case, I got to be in the court case, so I'll hold back on that part of this. But this staff member, he was super, super excited. And he's one of those guys, he actually lives on sites and works year round at camp. So this was something that he was, gearing up for a while. And he wanted to create like a camp legend. He really wanted there to be something on camp that people like would like whisper about, like,
Mm-hmm.
oh, Camp Winona has this. So I told him it had to be positive. It couldn't be like a negative, like scary thing. And he's like, okay, okay. And he created a camp monster, a sea monster, or a lake monster in our case. and you know, big bad Buford is this monster that lives in the lake, but he's a good monster. He like collects the lost and found that you lose at the bottom of the lake and things.
Nice.
And and unfortunately, we're telling the kids this summer the stories all summer about Buford. Buford, the lake monster. You got to keep your eyes open, look for the splashing in the lake, and maybe you'll see him like run across. And he did a lot of little things to make sure that the kids would start to believe in Buford. Like little signs around camp, or like lost and found would be like all piled up on the shore of the waterfront. So when kids came down, they'd be like, "What's that pile from?" It's like, "Oh, Buford must have found all the lost and found and put it there for us." Um, and did that like week 1 to week 4, like leading up to this, so that like the kids who are coming to camp for like extended periods of time knew the story of Buford, and they were telling the other kids and allowing it to like really muster up. And then session 5, which is our kind of water week at camp, we do like our campfires down the water. We call it water fire, and it's also when the 4th of July falls for us, so we do fireworks and stuff down there. A lot of water themed activities, a lot of waterfront present stuff.
Mm.
And he had a whole skit in place. Buford shows up, the whole week goes. Um, and the way the story went was that, Buford might not actually be a good guy. There were some pirates who tried to incriminate him and all this kind of stuff. And we ended up, I think, on Wednesday night, we did like a court case. Buford got arrested. He had his day in court. There was a jury of his peers. Like we had a judge. We had even like the person who like the typist, the courtroom person who tracks what everyone says and
Yeah,
all that
yeah.
kind of stuff. Called witnesses to the stand of all these native people, and um, I got to play the part of Buford's lawyer, which like the history almost lawyer in me was excited for, but also like the camp person in me was like, oh, finally I get to like get up and do like a skit and improv and stuff like that again. So I had a great time doing it. I love doing it. I love how invested all the kids got into it. They were
Mm.
obsessed with Buford. They were taking pictures with the counselor who we dressed up, and quite literally, Buford's costume was a pair of goggles, like a buff that came up, covered his face. We got all these like black tubes that we like glued to his back and like sewed in and stuff. Like barely could hold on. He walked around in flippers the whole time. We spray painted him green. It had to be the hottest and most uncomfortable thing to wear in the state of Florida. And man, the kid who played Buford, he rocked it. I mean, there was even one point like he like fell into the water and he had to wear this costume and swim and then hide behind a structure. We have a blob at camp, and he had to hide behind that for like 20 minutes so the kids wouldn't know that he was like a real person. He just kind of sat there in the water waiting for campfire to end and all the kids to leave, to really like hit home. And it was just
Nice.
cool to see all the counselors buy into it. The kids like buy into it. Like you have those older teens who are just like, yeah, it's a counselor, and even the younger kids kind of recognize it.
Yeah.
But like, there's something about that magic of like everyone just being like, no, man, he is real. Like
Yeah, yeah,
Buford is
yeah,
a thing.
yeah.
Um, and then like to have the court case and all that kind of stuff. Like for me, like I got to get involved, which I really enjoyed. And man, it was just so much fun. Like it was just smiles across the board. The kids were laughing. Like they were shouting like guilty, guilty. And then the other half was like, not guilty,
Hmm.
not guilty. So um,
That's fun.
yeah, it stuck with me. I'll remember the court case of Buford for a really long time, and I think Buford is now a camp legend. So something here at Winona will stick for a really long time about Buford on the lake and all this kind of stuff. So
Mm.
really happy times. So
That's
all
cool.
right, so those are some cool stories for us to hold on to for a really long time. But it's a new summer, and new kids come in, old kids come in, new staff come in, old staff come in. But things change. It's not the same from year to year, and over time we see some things. So, Matt, what are some changes you started to see this year in campers and staff? What are the positives? What are the negatives? What did you really see? Kind of was the new culture at camp?
Mm. Hmm. Yeah. Okay. That I had a lot of thoughts about this one, so maybe let's start with staff, and then we'll go to campers. I think there's two things that I saw about staff. One on the positive side, one on the like could be positive side. So first one, I noticed that our team this summer, especially our like counselors, our frontline people, they really thrived on feedback. They wanted to get feedback from the people that were supporting them, from me as the camp director, and for the most part, they were actually really willing to engage with that feedback. I found that in past years and with past people that I've worked with in general, people were kind of fragile when it came to giving feedback, and I think that's equally on the person giving it and receiving it to make sure that it's it's given well. But I found staff quite great to try it, which is cool. And I think, the only thing, the caveat with that is, I think that camp isn't always the place. We're going to talk about this in a future episode, but it's not always the place where you're going to get as much feedback as you want because we're so focused on the camper experience. And, as a director, there's a lot of things to do as a camp director, and one of those things that doesn't make it to the top of my list is observing and giving feedback our frontline counselors. We have other staff members that it's their role to do that, and we'll give them that feedback. So if you're a counselor listening to this, it's not that your director doesn't care, and it's not that they're not like watching and like getting feedback from watching you. They just might not have the time to deliver it, or they might be giving it to your supervisor to deliver directly to you. So that was one thing. Then the other thing, I think this kind of makes sense coming out of pandemic. Wherever you feel like we are in the pandemic right now, from being in lockdown, I think because a lot of people haven't used those like kid muscles in a while, or they haven't used like socialization muscles. I think I just noticed lower confidence in our frontline, especially in all of our staff. I think probably even in myself a little bit, if we're being honest. And just like that worry that we have to be perfect, and especially when you're working with medical kids, there are lots of extra sensitivities that you need to consider. But it's not like our kids are porcelain dolls. Like, you're not gonna, if they like get sad for 5 minutes, it's not going to ruin their week. And I think our counselors, they rightly so, they put so much of the camper experience on themselves that they want it to be outstanding, and want every moment to be outstanding, that they just need to like be okay to try something and be okay that it doesn't go great, and knowing that's not going to be a reflection of their like their overall ability or what we think of them, and it's not going to completely shatter a kid's experience if your game doesn't go as well as you thought. So those are my two kind of staff observations. What did you notice, Oliver?
Yeah, for me with staff, the first thing I noticed was that they're coming in with less skills that they know how to do. It was specifically camp related skills.
Right.
You know, some basic knot tying. Like, even I have counselors who have trouble like tying their shoe, and that's not a lie. Like,
Hmm.
legitimately, and it is. I don't know if it's maybe they just don't care, but yeah, like trying, but that's a simple skill. Or maybe fire building to me, but outdoor cooking. But like, even across the board, like, I have counselors who will come and their swimming is not to what swimming should be, right? Like, um, and granted, there are some people who may not ever learn how to swim. There's some people who may not do a lot of like fire building and stuff. There's all different skills, but it's unanimous across the board when you hire something like 40 staff and you're looking at 35 people who don't know how to start a fire,
Right.
right?
Yep.
That's a huge number. And you go across that board, and maybe it's not just that they can't tie a knot, but it's that they can't warp their brain into the spot to actually be able to tie it. Like, they don't have a transferable skill that they can then put into it, right?
Mm.
Their hand, maybe they've never learned to knit, and therefore, like, tracking the rope as it passes through the bite or something like that, it's not something that they've gained
Right.
through other skills that they can transfer over. And I don't know where to put it, but like, it's very much like, to me, it's like, yeah, you can watch a lot of TikTok videos, you can watch a lot of YouTube videos, you can go to those for reference when it comes time to try and do the skill, but to like practice and regularly do something,
Yes.
there's a lot of
Yes.
benefit in that. and I think it's getting really really lost because oh, I might see a cool video on knot tying as I'm going through, or like maybe my TikTok has like survivor talk on it or whatever it's called as you're scrolling through, and you'll see somebody who like learns to boil water with like a cool water bottle or something like that. um but to actually like go out in the woods and have a problem, have to solve it, figure out that solution, whatever it might be, and it transfers into all skills, like even sports, swimming, like I mentioned before, like it's just there's this lack, right? They're behind on that skill set. They're still learning or catching up on it, like
Right.
where somebody back in the back in the day, old man Oliver coming out, might have come into camp at least having the transferability of another skill to get that skill down. So that's a big thing for me, and I think staff as well. There's a big struggle with their social skills and social battery. Again, that might be social media, that face-to-face interaction, but like not knowing what to say, or they tire out really quickly from being around their campers, and they need more breaks, they need more time to relax, um, and I'm not saying like you don't need to take a break during the day, like you don't need to go and take 5 minutes here or 10 minutes there, like that. I totally understand, but a lot of staff like just getting overwhelmed by sometimes like the day, right? Like
Yeah.
just, and it's not like they had a problem cabin. They're not having behavioral issues. Um, it's just, hey, look, I'm tired. I don't like. I'm super introverted. I just hear that a lot, and I get introversion. I have times where I want my social battery to get recouped, but it seems like even an extroverted battery is at a lower battery level than maybe what it should be. That was a big thing. But I'll end on a positive note, and I think staff still find the beauty in camp at the end of the summer. Like my
Mm-hmm.
staff at the end of the summer, they still were crying that they had to leave. They still didn't want to say goodbye to their friends. I think a big part is the friendships they foster, like their fellow counselors and stuff is a big part of it. Like they have these friends now that are going to last a lifetime, and that connection is so important to them. And also, I think this year for my staff, they started to notice the impact they were having on campers a bit too, a bit more than they did last year, which I thought was amazing. And I think because of what I talked about before, where there's this difference in that skill sets, I think staff are starting to notice that they can really provide a change. I'll talk about campers in a second, but I think the staff are recognizing that their job has a big impact on kids nowadays. That it's there. So that was a big thing for me. So
Mm.
those are my staff things. What are your camper things, Matt? What are some differences or things that you noticed in campers this summer?
For sure. And I'll preface this with saying that maybe this has been going on for the past like 3 summers, because that's, if you think about it, yeah, I think about I've been 3 summers out of like just pure kids camp, just with me taking a break from camp for a while. But um, I really, in that break, with a pandemic being included in that break, I really noticed even more the influence that social media and like TikTok and that kind of stuff has been having on kids. And I really just mean that in the sense of, like, they just know so much more, their language is so much more developed, their knowledge of topics is so much more developed. And like, again, maybe this is just, again, we're bringing out our like boomer sides here, Oliver, but I feel like their innocence is just like has been diminished just a little bit. They've become so much more like citizens of the world. They know about politics. They're like, knowledge of what I would have deemed appropriate when I was like a cabin counselor is like completely different, because they're just exposed to so much more. And I found that I was really fortunate that our counselors also had like know like this their reps when it comes to social media, so they know what campers are talking about and what are the subtle things that they're saying or the content that they're coming up with. And it's not like, it's not shocking, we know where it's coming from. But I just I personally was like, man, you know a lot for an 8-year-old. And so that really surprised me, and it took me a little bit to adjust me just being like upset that they knew those things or they were saying those words. And when I understood the why behind it, I changed my mindset from like thinking about it like they need to feel sorry for what they said, or that it's not the best way to phrase it, but what I changed my mindset into was, do they actually know what they're saying, and do they actually know the history of that word or that term, or what a stereotype is, or what, like how what they're saying could be really hurtful or really triggering for other people in their cabins who might not, who might come from a household where they're not allowed to watch social media at that age. So there was a lot more educating that came from that advanced knowledge than I expected. But I definitely have a new appreciation for it. We could do a whole episode on how we teach kids empathy. Um, and I think that also, maybe this is just me being out of the kids camp game for a while, but I did find, and some counselors told me that they noticed it too, was that there was a bit of a just a lack of inherent desire for kids to listen to adults. And I'm pretty sure this is me being a boomer, that maybe this always happened, but um, you know, our counselors really struggled, especially with like intermediate boys, like the 10 to 12-year-old boys. That age group really gave us a challenge, and had us made really think about like how are we training counselors to get kids to listen in a non-conventional way. um, because you can't just tell them to listen. They don't have that inherent desire inside of them as much. Some do, but writ large, they didn't. And also how to not get frustrated by that as well, because it's frustrating when a kid doesn't listen. So, whether that's new or old, those are the things that I've really been thinking about in terms of like meeting our this generation of campers where they're at. Does that ring true to you, Oliver? Do you like, is that less desire to listen? Did you notice that this summer?
Honestly, it really hits home for me. I definitely see that, not just this year, but like for a bit now,
Mm,
it's been ringing true. And I like, man, there's so many things that all connect back to technology and social media. But like one of the big things for me is like kids growing up today, like they might have their parent as an authority figure, but they don't have as many authority figures in their life that they, I don't want to say listen to verbatim, but they develop a respect to through the learning and growth and development that that person helps them with.
mhm.
And what I mean is going back to it, like if they need information, if they need something, it's on the internet.
Right.
What and not only that, but if they need to hear a voice, if they need to gather an opinion and they want to understand what's going on with something they don't, that opinion is available to them online as well. Not just factual evidence, not just the how to change a tire, which hopefully an 8-year old is
Yeah.
not doing, but it's the hey, how should you feel about this situation? And depending on what route they go on their social media, right, on their internet influence towards them, right, the authority figures who give them an opinion are so vast and might have more mature content or reasoning, might have different content than really what they should be listening to. And I remember growing up and hating the word dogmatic, like to listen to somebody just to listen to somebody. And now that I'm starting to become older, I'm starting to think, oh man, like the loss of dogmatism also has its negatives, right? That, you know, that ability to have those people within your life directly who socially are close to you, invested in you, like who have had experiences around you, who will give you their opinions and outline. Now, that doesn't mean you need to have their opinions, but you're I think that having that gives you the ability to not just listen, but to show respect um, and have that empathy that you were talking about, because you have to do it to that person. That person is important to you. That the relationship you have with that person is, but the relationship you have with that online community is
Mm-hmm.
consumption,
Hmm.
not you having to give back to that community. It's just what they give you. You
Yes. Yeah. Yeah.
consume it.
Yeah. Yeah.
You
Yeah.
become it, right? And then you just feed into it. Whereas if you have that person in your life who says, hey, look, you need to learn how to tie your shoes. You're not going to be able to walk in those shoes, right? This is how you can tie that knot, right? Go through that experience of them maybe getting frustrated that you can't do it. Like
Mhm.
having a person get angry at you because they've been trying to teach you how to tie your shoe for a month and you can't get it done. Like that might seem like a negative, but you develop a relationship with that person nonetheless, right?
Mm.
And hopefully it becomes positive. Hopefully you learn how to tie your shoe. Hopefully they're encouraging and they can give you the
Yeah.
time and all these things that, we teach staff how to do and going back to it. But I think your relationship with a human being in figuring out which course your life goes is so valuable and it's getting lost. And that means that the listening and the empathy and that desire to learn from someone who's directly affiliated with your life is getting lost to the influence that you can get from your phone, from your social media, and all that. So, it's I think it's
Yeah.
wild.
Well, I think what you're saying, Oliver, is so true, especially from the standpoint you said, like the effect on the community is like you don't think about that when you're on social media. Like your effect on the community on social media is how many likes you can get, is how many people you can get to pay attention to you, and not necessarily to agree with you, but just to pay attention to you. And I think like the work of being someone who takes care of kids and helps them grow, which is what we do at camp, um, is that it's our job to help them realize the effect that they have on their community as well. That's why I said like a kid will just say something, or you see like the TikTok trends where people like prank each other and like do some pretty horrible stuff to each other. Um, and you don't think about the human story behind those things because that's not the point of the video. It's all like quick cut, reaction, reaction, like and subscribe. And I think that our
Yeah.
job is to help them understand the why behind it or what their intentions are so that they can understand when it's not just like a cabin of kids they're pissing off because they're saying this loud and obnoxious thing, that it's going to hurt them in the long run when they're working towards becoming a member of a community outside of camp. And you're right. It's not like it is dogmatic in the sense that like we say something and we would like you to listen to it. Um, we do have standards that we expect kids to uphold when they're a part of these communities because it's important for other people, and it's not just because the rules aren't there for a reason. And I am the first one to question a rule and why it exists. And we should be getting kids to question rules, but we should also have them help them be able to listen when we explain why those rules are there, or when we understand the impact. And um, I don't think that that's a new thing at all necessarily, that we should explain the why behind it, but um, it's important nonetheless.
Yeah. And I mean, camp, like from my points were really, really quickly, they were, camp is getting more important than ever, right? We say this every single year. And I think we've always been reiterating this point. And I think saying it though, and saying it every year means that it's getting progressively more necessary. And I think that's going to this point of they're missing those experiences that camp provides that they were supplemented outside of camp, right? So, like the if a kid is spending 2 hours a day scrolling through TikTok or like watching Netflix or whatever they're doing that's consumption of that's 2 hours that doesn't go into their development, right? It's 2 hours. And if you add that time up over the course of a year, 2 hours a day, 7 days a week, 52 days a year, that's a lot of time now every year that a kid is not getting developmental things in their life. And that was supplementary to camp. So now they're coming to camp without those hours put in. And at that point, it's days of, you know, not enough of that special stuff that camp gives. And they're coming to camp and we're recognizing that void because what we do is that 2 hours of whether it was, family sitting down for dinner, which might not happen in every home, whether it was going to play in sports or whether it was just going outside on the street and riding your bike around until the lights went off, like the boomers that we're pretending to be used to do, right? Like that's lost time. in your social growth and development. And I think we've noticed now in the camping world that it's getting progressively more and more that we're the ones taking on that burden. It's not a burden we like are eager to take on. It's why we do camp. But I think that's kind of part of it. It's a big part of it. Um, so we'll move on to our last point because this is supposed to be our short episode of the season. Um, but but let's talk about where we'll maybe condense our episodes down and really keep to some more specific stuff. So, Matt, what are we going to be working on this winter? What are some of our show topics and things like that that we want to cover so we can address some of the things we've talked about today, or maybe some things that we think would be cool to make sure campers and staff get going into summer 2024?
Yeah, and Oliver, let's face it, I don't think we're ever going to have a short episode. I don't know if it's going to happen, but I really value this time getting to unpack these things with you, and it's always a good conversation. So I'm excited to do more. And this is just a short list. I think it was like in a fever dream this summer. It was one night I was like, I want to talk about all these things for this coming season. So I'm gonna run through it, and then we have a call to action for you listeners. Okay, ready? What does it mean to put campers first? Why your experience might come second. Number two, how do we know when a staff member isn't camper centric? How do we know when they're not camper first? Why kids misbehave and how to recognize misbehavior. Behavior management 101, how to deal with that, how to prevent it. Bigger behaviors and how to manage when shit really hits the fan. What do you do? What does your camp director actually do all day? Who knows? Let's unpack that. Your camp supervisor, understanding each other's role, why feedback is important and how not to take it personally, your mental health at camp, helping cabins form a bond, your role during programs, how to be the best attendee as part of a program, why staff get fired, and what should you do? Or what shouldn't you do as well? Um, don't be that staff member. So helping with some socialization stuff while you're on staff, how to be positive in social situations, and what to do if you're not the most social person. Staff that are hard to get along with, how to work with a staff member that you hate. Oof, that's a tricky one. What separates an okay counselor from a great counselor? How to get that next step of development as a counselor. And then also some more things about how to support campers with physical accessibility needs, supporting campers with cognitive accessibility needs, with social accessibility needs. How do we make camp a great place for them as well? And those topics and more coming on this season of First Class Counselors.
Yeah, and don't forget, we're a show that wants to do shows about the things you need. So if there's something that you want us to talk about, please submit your ideas to us, and we will make sure to take advantage of those ideas. Maybe even call you on the show with us so you can talk about them too. The other thing too is if you heard anything in those categories that you were like, man, I got a great point for that. Don't be scared to message us. Matt has an email. It's matt@gocamp. Pro. So you can get a hold of Matt at gocamp.pro. So message him your ideas, message him if you want to join us on the show and everything like that. We're in season 6 now. So I think this is like episode 64. We've got a lot of information out there, and we want to make sure that we have other voices too. Matt and I don't want to repeat ourselves. We want to keep feeding you guys some new, fresh ideas. And that might take one of you guys to come and help us out. So with that being said, that's all the stuff that we talk about for the show topic, but we always finish on a nice little note, and that's our E.G.E.L, our ever growing, ever learning. So it's a trick, a tip, game, or song for counselors to use to be better every day. Matt, what is your first E.G.E.L of the season?
My first E.G.E.L, I'm starting boring because it's only going to get better, but it's boring and utterly practical, and that is a headlamp. Just get yourself a headlamp. We may have talked about this before, but it's just such a great way to have light at camp because camp is dark. If you've never worked at camp before and you're hearing this, it gets dark. And having a headlamp is just a great little hands-free way. You can get them on Amazon. You can go to your local like REI or MEC, depending on what country you're listening to this. Any outdoor store, you will find a headlamp. And even if it's like a crappy one, I encourage you to get like a rechargeable one. That's always great if your camp has power where you could recharge it. It's better for the environment. But it's just so great, and it will help you not rely on your phone because along with a watch that I maybe I'll put a watch in here too as my other one. Like not a smart watch, just a straight up digital or analog with watch with a face. Those things will help you keep your phone away. And we did a whole episode on you and your phone at camp, which I thought was really great. We got some good feedback about it. But the reason we use our phone is because there's so many tools attached to it now. It's our flashlight, it's our clock, it's our calculator, it's all those things. And where I don't know if for this job you need to carry a calculator around, but a good flashlight and a good watch will certainly help you as a counselor. So headlamp and sure wristwatch are my two E.G.E.Ls.
Matt's really nice. I am one of those people who have bad practice, and I walk around camp in the dark all the time, no headlight, and it's just the way I do it. And my staff make fun of me all the time. They're like, "Oliver, why do you do it?" And I was like, "I'm the camp director. I know every step and every route on property, so I don't
and
I
then
don't
and
need
then
that
you fall
headlight."
over
So
promptly.
hey, I'm pretty good. I'm pretty good. I hold my own, but no. Even still, when I go out camping, I'm in unfamiliar territory. I always make sure to have that headlamp on me just in case. Um, it is something that's really important to have in that toolkit as a counselor as well. Because, as a camp director, I'll pull it out when I need it, but you'll probably need it all the time as a camp counselor. I know that I couldn't get away with it when I was just a counselor. I get away with it now as a director, but definitely not as a counselor. So, my angle, though, to help you guys out with a fun little activity is you've probably seen it on TikTok. You probably know about this type of game, but you get a nice little box and you can poke a bunch of straws in it, and then you put a bunch of different drinks in there, and then the kids can come up and they can test each drink and try and figure out what the flavor is, what's inside. And you can do it with a bunch of different camp drinks and stuff like that. Or you can even do a blind food test, right? They got to guess what food is which. And here's the deal: you do it with the extra leftovers and stuff from the dining hall. They might have to identify something they had earlier that week, whatever it might be. I really loved doing this once with like unique fruits. So we got like obviously like oranges and apples and stuff, but then we throw like a kiwi or a dragon fruit in there, and really throw kids for a loop, and they'd be like, "What am I eating?" And then they see that like alien fruit, and you're like, "See how cool it is." But that's my
Nice,
Eggle, and that's our
nice.
show. So if you enjoyed today's show, we'd be so grateful if you left us a review wherever you're listening to this podcast. Your ratings and reviews not only tell us what you like and don't like about the show, but it helps boost our rankings and help more people discover this wonderful piece of information we're giving out to everybody.
And please remember that you can find all of our show notes at gocamp.pro/FCC. There's lots of great stuff there from our show and other Go Camp Pro podcasts. We're just launching this season if you are listening in October of 2023. So we are excited for another great season of podcasts to come. So please like and subscribe and tell your friends about it.
Yeah. Thanks for listening, friends. And remember, camp is camp and camp's all good.